You were not placed in an avoidance life to prove that you are lovable. You were placed there to stop living as if your love must be earned. Because the first keynote is this: an avoidance distance is not a measurement of your worth. It is a reflection of what closeness does inside their nervous system. And if you don't understand that, you will keep interpreting their withdrawal as your failure. You will keep shrinking yourself to fit into someone's comfort zone. You will keep turning your needs into apologies. And you will keep calling crumbs love just because your heart is hungry. When an avoidant gets close, it can feel like the most intoxicating thing you've ever experienced. Not because they are more special than anyone else, but because your brain gets pulled into a cycle of unpredictability. One day they are warm, present, and almost tender. The next day they are distant, distracted, and suddenly too busy to remember the words they said when they were close. And your nervous system starts chasing the version of them that felt safe. That chasing becomes your focus, your obsession, your prayer. And you tell yourself you're doing it because you love them. But the truth is deeper. You're doing it because your brain learned to crave relief from the anxiety they triggered. This is why it feels like heartbreak is living in your body. Because it is. The brain doesn't only store memories. It stores patterns. And when you attach to someone who alternated between connection and withdrawal, your reward system started to link love with uncertainty. Dopamine rises when they return. Dopamine crashes when they disappear. And that crash doesn't just make you sad. It makes you desperate. It makes you overthink. It makes you reach. It makes you send the message you promised you wouldn't send. It makes you rehearse conversations in your head, as if the right sentence could finally make them stay. And the longer you do that, the more your self-respect becomes something you negotiate instead of something you protect. But here is where the shift happens. Because you were placed in their life for a reason that is bigger than them. You were placed there so you could finally see the difference between chemistry and safety. So you could finally understand that intensity is not intimacy. So you could finally stop calling mixed signals depth and start recognizing them as emotional unavailability. Because love, real love, does not require you to betray yourself to keep it. An avoidance nervous system often learned early that closeness comes with a cost, that needing someone invites disappointment, criticism, or pressure. So they developed a strategy for survival. They learned to stay in control by staying slightly unavailable. They learned to feel powerful by keeping one foot out the door. Not because they are evil, but because fear taught them that attachment is a trap. And when you come along with real warmth, real presence, real desire to build something steady, their system can interpret that as danger. So they pull back, not because you are too much, but because closeness is too loud inside their body. And you, being the person who loves deeply, start doing the thing you've always done when love feels threatened. You try harder, you explain more, you become more patient than you should, you become more understanding than is healthy. You start treating their inconsistency like a puzzle you can solve. You start believing that if you just love them correctly, they will finally relax into you. But loving someone correctly is not the same as losing yourself for them. And that is the trap this dynamic sets. It rewards you for abandoning your own needs, then punishes you when you finally ask for consistency. So the keynote is not about blaming them. It is about waking you up. Because if you keep making their withdrawal your responsibility, you will keep repeating this pattern with different faces. You will keep confusing emotional hunger for emotional connection. And you will keep calling your anxiety love, when really it is your nervous system begging for stability. You were placed in their life so you could learn this powerful truth. You cannot heal someone who refuses to face their own fear. You cannot love someone into emotional availability. You cannot sacrifice enough to earn security from a person who is committed to distance. And the moment you accept that, you stop taking their behavior personally. You stop using their inconsistency as a mirror. And you start using it as information. Information changes everything. Because once you see clearly, you start making different choices. You stop chasing a closing door. You stop asking for the basics like they are favors. You stop waiting for a text to determine your mood. You stop living on emotional standby, and you start returning to yourself, not as a dramatic statement, but as a daily practice, a quiet commitment, a private decision that says, I will not abandon me again. And it will feel painful at first, because your brain will still crave the hit of their attention. It will still romanticize the highs. It will still forget the nights you cried, the days you doubted yourself, the moments you felt like you had to perform calmness, just to keep them close. But healing is when you remember the whole story, not the highlight reel. Healing is when you stop calling the bare minimum a miracle. Healing is when you stop treating your longing as proof of destiny and start treating your peace as proof of growth. You were placed in their life to graduate from the version of you that thought love must be proven, to become the version of you that knows love must be reciprocated. And when you truly learn that, you don't become cold, you become clear. You don't stop loving, you stop begging. You don't stop caring, you stop collapsing. You don't stop feeling, you stop chasing what hurts you. Because the most heartbreaking part of loving an avoidant is not their distance. It is the way their distance can teach you to doubt your own value. And the most powerful part of this lesson is this: you get to take your value back. You get to stop measuring yourself by someone's capacity. You get to stop interpreting silence as a verdict. You get to stop confusing their fear with your failure. And you get to choose the kind of love that does not cost you your dignity, your sleep, your confidence, your voice. An avoidance distance is not proof that you are unlovable. It is proof that their nervous system learned love equals danger. And if you let their fear become your mirror, you will spend your life trying to fix a wound you did not create. You will keep asking the same painful question, what is wrong with me? When the real question is, what happened to them that made closeness feel unsafe? You have to understand this, because your heart keeps translating their withdrawal as rejection. And your mind keeps replaying every moment you were a little too honest, a little too emotional, a little too attached, as if your humanity was the reason they pulled away. But your humanity is not the problem. Your need for consistency is not the problem. Your desire to be chosen clearly is not the problem. The problem is that you were offering connection to someone whose body reacts to connection like it's a fire alarm. For many avoidant people, intimacy does not register as comfort. It registers as threat, not in a dramatic, conscious way, but in a quiet, automatic way. Their chest tightens when things get serious. Their mind looks for escape routes when you ask for clarity. Their nervous system starts scanning for ways to regain control when you get close. And control is how they self-soothe. Control is how they breathe. Control is how they avoid the vulnerability that once hurt them. So they do what their system learned to do. They detach, they delay, they minimize, they disappear. And then they come back when the pressure lowers, when the closeness fades, when the emotional temperature drops. And you, being someone who loves with your whole chest, you interpret the return as hope. You think, maybe they realized. Maybe they're changing. Maybe they finally understand what I mean to them. But the cycle was never about your value. It was about regulation. They leave to calm their internal alarm. They return when their system feels safe again. And in that loop, you get trained to wait, to tolerate, to accept uncertainty as normal, and slowly, without noticing, you start believing that love has to be confusing to be real. This keynote is here to take that belief out of your hands and break it gently. Because love that hurts you into self. Doubt is not love you should romanticize. And love that makes you work for basics is not love you should chase. But before you can stop chasing, you have to stop making their behavior about your worth. Their distance is not a report card of your desirability. Their silence is not a measurement of your importance. Their inconsistency is not proof you are too much. It is proof their nervous system has a limited capacity for closeness. And the most dangerous thing you can do is keep translating their limitation into a story about you. Because the moment you do that, you start bargaining with yourself. You start thinking, if I act calmer, they'll stay. If I ask for less, they'll feel safe. If I don't bring up my needs, they won't run. If I love them quietly, they'll finally choose me loudly. And it sounds noble. It sounds patient. It sounds understanding, but it is abandonment. It is you leaving yourself in small ways to keep someone else comfortable. And every time you do it, you teach your own nervous system that your needs are inconvenient, that your voice is risky, that your love must be earned through silence. And that is not love. That is survival. So let's be honest. The hardest part is that avoidant people can be incredibly sincere in the moments they are present. They can look you in the eyes and make you feel like you are the only person in the room. They can be soft, funny, affectionate, and then the next day they can turn cold. Not because you changed, but because closeness activated something in them. Some old memory, some old fear. Some old wiring that says, don't need anyone. Needing equals pain. Needing equals losing control. And when that wiring turns on, they become someone you don't recognize. That switch is what breaks your heart. Because you keep trying to love the version of them that was warm. You keep chasing the person they were at the beginning. You keep hoping the beginning is the truth, and the distance is the exception. But if the pattern repeats, the pattern is the truth. And you were placed in their life to finally respect patterns more than promises. And here is the emotional truth that will set you free. You can have compassion for their fear without volunteering your life to it. You can understand their past without making it your prison. You can recognize their wounds without letting them wound you, because compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. This is where you stop asking, how do I make them feel safe? And you start asking, how do I make myself feel safe? Because your nervous system deserves safety too. Your heart deserves steadiness too. Your love deserves reciprocity too. And you will never create safety by chasing someone who creates anxiety. If their nervous system equates love with danger, you cannot out-love that. You cannot talk your way through that. You cannot perform perfection until they relax, because this is not about you being enough. This is about them being ready. And readiness is not something you can force. It is something a person chooses, with awareness, with healing, with accountability, with consistent action. And this is the moment you reclaim your power. You stop personalizing their distance. You stop taking their withdrawal as evidence that you failed. And you start seeing it as information. This person cannot meet me where I am. This person cannot hold the kind of closeness I want. This person may care, but care is not commitment, and affection is not emotional availability. You stop trying to win a place in their life, and you start choosing the kind of love that chooses you back. Because the goal is not to be loved in pieces. The goal is to be loved in full, without anxiety, without guessing, without earning, without shrinking. And I know, letting go feels impossible at first, because your brain has been conditioned by the intermittent reward, the unpredictable affection, the sudden warmth that arrives after silence. It keeps you hooked. It keeps you hopeful. It keeps you waiting for the next high. But healing is when you stop confusing the high with love. Healing is when you choose the calm, even if calm feels unfamiliar. Healing is when you stop needing someone's return to prove you mattered. Because you mattered even when they pulled away. You were worthy even when they got distant. You were enough even when they couldn't stay close. And the day you truly believe that, you stop chasing people who make love feel like a test. You start walking toward people who make love feel like home. Heartbreak is not just sadness. It is a neurological withdrawal, and that is why it can feel like your body is betraying you. Because you are not only missing a person, you are missing a pattern, a rhythm, a chemical expectation your brain got used to. And when that pattern disappears, your nervous system doesn't interpret it as a simple ending, it interprets it as a threat to survival. Which is why you can be strong in every other area of your life and still feel completely undone by one person's absence. When you were attached to them, your brain learned their timing, their attention, their little signals of approval. And especially in an avoidant dynamic, those signals were inconsistent, and inconsistency is gasoline for obsession, because the brain doesn't lock hardest onto what is steady. It locks hardest onto what is unpredictable. It's the same reason people get hooked on slots, not because they win every time, but because they win sometimes, and that, sometimes, creates anticipation, creates craving, creates hope, and the craving starts to feel like love, even when it is quietly anxiety. So when they pulled away, your brain didn't just say, "Oh, that's unfortunate," it said, "Something is wrong, get it back, fix it, chase it, restore the connection," because the connection became regulation. It became the way your nervous system calmed down. It became the way your mind got relief. And when the relief disappears, your brain goes into protest. It replays memories like evidence. It creates fantasies like medicine. It scans your phone like a reflex. It tries to bargain with the past. If I had said this, if I had been calmer, if I had not asked for clarity, maybe they would still be here. And this is why heartbreak can make you feel embarrassed of yourself, because you think, why am I acting like this? Why can't I just move on? Why am I still thinking, still checking, still hoping, still breaking my own promises? But what you're calling weakness is often your brain doing what it was designed to do. It is trying to restore a bond it believed was important. And because you are human, your brain is built to treat bonding as survival, not as a hobby. There's something else too, and you need to hear it without blaming yourself. When love comes with uncertainty, your stress system stays activated, cortisol rises, your body stays on alert, and then when they give you warmth again, you get a release, and your brain stores that as powerful, it stores that as relief. Not because they are your destiny, but because your nervous system was starving, and they fed it for a moment. And you started confusing relief with safety. You started confusing the end of anxiety with intimacy. Now the heartbreak begins, and your brain goes into withdrawal, dopamine drops, your motivation drops, your appetite changes, your sleep breaks. And the ache is not poetic, it is biological. It's why you can feel the pain in your chest, why your throat tightens, why your stomach turns. Your body is processing loss like a physical event. And when people say, just distract yourself, it can sound insulting. Because you're not bored, you're grieving, you're detoxing from a bond that shaped your nervous system. But here is the part that turns this keynote into power. A withdrawal is not a life sentence, it is a process, and processes can be guided, not by force, not by pretending you're fine, but by understanding what your brain is asking for, and giving it healthier answers. Because the brain is asking for certainty, and you keep trying to get certainty from the person who created uncertainty. You keep trying to get closure from the one who left the door half open. And that is like trying to put out fire with gasoline. It keeps you burning. Not because you love too much, but because you're trying to heal in the same place you got hurt. So you have to become your own regulator, your own stability, your own source of calm. Not in a cold way, in a loving way. In a way that says, I will not abandon myself just because my brain is craving the familiar, and I know it will scream at first. Because your nervous system has been trained to reach, trained to check, trained to chase relief, and the first stage of healing is not confidence, it is discomfort. Because you are teaching your body a new normal. This is why no contact, or at least no checking, is not punishment. It is medicine. It's not about winning them back. It is about getting your brain back. Because every time you look at their profile, every time you read old messages, every time you search for a sign, you reopen the circuit. You feed the craving, you keep the loop alive, and then you wonder why you can't move on. Because the brain learns by repetition, and you keep repeating the attachment ritual, even when the relationship is gone. So what do? You make your healing practical. You treat it like a nervous system recovery. You sleep like it matters. Because it does. You eat like it matters. Because it does. You move your body because movement tells the brain, we are safe. We are alive. We are still here. You breathe deeply because breath interrupts panic. You speak to someone grounded because co-regulation is real. You stop isolating because isolation tells the brain, danger, danger, danger. And emotionally, you tell the truth, not the soft truth that keeps you attached, the full truth, the whole story, the nights you cried, the days you shrank, the moments you felt you had to earn consistency, the ways you abandoned your needs to keep them close. And you don't tell that story to punish them. You tell it to free yourself. Because the brain heals faster when it stops romanticizing the source of pain. Then you replace the fantasy with a standard. You stop saying, but we had something special. And you start saying, special is not enough. I need safe. I need steady. I need mutual. Because the cure for nervous system obsession is not to find someone new immediately. It is to find yourself again. To rebuild your identity outside the loop. To remember what your life feels like when it is not centered around waiting. And one day, you'll notice the craving hits, and it passes. You'll notice you thought of them, and you didn't spiral. You'll notice you heard a song, and your chest tightened, and then released. And that is the neuroscience of healing. Repetition of safety. Repetition of boundaries. Repetition of choosing yourself, until your brain stops expecting danger and starts expecting peace. Until your nervous system stops mistaking longing for love and starts recognizing calm as the real sign of connection. Until you can miss them without reaching for them. Until you can remember them without returning to them. Until your heart can hold the lesson without holding the chain. Until the version of you who used to beg for clarity becomes the version of you who only accepts what is clear, steady, and honest. Even when it's quiet. Even when it's simple. Even when it doesn't come with a chase